just before I introduce my panel, blockchain, just as our MC has mentioned, is really incredible technology, but it's a tool. It's a step in the gateway, if I may put it that way, because our needs are constantly evolving. So needs are the real drivers of disruption at the end of the day. But I want us to be able to see what blockchain will open up for us in terms of solutions and applications right now. So please help me welcome Eugene Mutai as he comes up to the stage. We'll also have Rosemary Kimatu coming up to talk to us. We'll have Eddie Kago. We'll have Betty Rose Ngugi. All right, and Mr. David Kimaru. Let's appreciate them. Okay. Awesome. So Eugene Mutai, as some of you know him, is a full-stack developer at Andela, and he's also had some very good experience with cryptocurrencies. Eddie Cargo is the lead developer at Hyperledger, right? Awesome. And Rosemary Kimoto is the legal and regulatory specialist at Oxygen. Awesome. And David Kimaru is the technology director at Living Foods. Now, I want us to just be able to listen and to hear from these people just blockchain, what are the real applications? I want you to hear their experiences with this tech and what their perspectives are, so that we're able to tear this tech apart away from the crypto talk. And one thing I will really steer away from in this talk is talk about cryptos. We have enough of that in other forums, don't we? Don't we? Awesome, yes, I'd really love your participation in this. It's a discussion, right? Awesome, so I will appreciate you if you just raise your hand or nod your head, and I will know that you're following, and I'll know that this session is beneficial to you, okay? All right? Yes, thank you for your responsiveness. Now, let me begin with blockchain as a definition so that we're all on board, okay? All right? Great, please walk with me. Let's do this as seamlessly as possible. So blockchain is distributed ledger technology, right? It's a database that's append only, that's transparent, and that's decentralized. Those are some of its key properties. And one more thing about it, it's that it's applied cryptography. So that's why we're talking about the technical aspect of it in terms of computing and development and software and all that stuff, right? And the other thing about blockchain now that brings the application of it to another level is the area of smart contracts. And a smart contract is basically a program that is self-executable and it's readable, it's transparent. It's just something that you write as a code, right? And one very practical application of a smart contract is that if I want to buy a car, I should be able to just have it in a very seamless fashion, that it knows I am the right person who wants to buy this specific car. I have the funds to buy the car. I'm buying them from a specific dealer, and it's an authentic product. I know that I'm getting what I want. And that smart contract should be able to verify all these details and execute them without so much of problems being in that process, right? So that's just one application that I'll mention, even just preempting us talking about blockchain. But our panelists can also define for us what is blockchain and what's a smart contract. So my first question to them, even probably on your behalf, is, in your experience, what has blockchain technology opened up for you as an opportunity and as a professional? We begin with you, Eugene.
Okay. So my name is Eugene. I've been researching about blockchain for probably, I think, almost 2 years right now. And also I've been looking for active developments around Africa, because I really feel it's the next best invention besides the internet itself and the sliced bread. So how I define blockchain is I usually use Instagram. So I just do that because it's easy for everybody, because I'm pretty sure like a lot of people don't understand what blockchain is. So let's just like, if you went to my Instagram account and actually if all of you went to my Instagram account and viewed an image from my Instagram account, what each of you would be viewing from your phone is a copy of my image. Like each of you would have a copy, like each of you would have an individual copy. So if 100 people are viewing the same image in their phones with 100 phones, that would be like Instagram has duplicated that image 100 times to your mobile phones. And that's actually in the basis how the internet works. The internet works by copying information from one location to the other. But now, let's think about money. So if I was to upload money to Instagram and each of you accessed that money from Instagram, each of you would have 100 copies of that money. And I still will have the original copy. So if it was 100 shillings, I would have the original 100 shillings, and each of you would have the 100 shillings. When it comes to money or assets or any asset, basically something that has to have a single identity and only exist once, and if it's moved across once. And that's what happens with money. That's what happens when like you sell your phone to a friend, because you give them your phone and it goes completely. You don't stay with a pair or copy of the phone. And so if you look at that basis of how the internet works, it's flawed when you want to transmit value, because you're talking about cars, title deeds, shares, bonds, anything else that has one needs to exist once and transmitted once as a form of value. So what the blockchain does is it adds an additional layer on top. It's made of 3 components, but I won't go into that. But when it's added on top of that, now you can actually now transmit money. So if actually Instagram was running on top of blockchain and I uploaded 1,000 Kenya shillings, the first person to access that 1,000 Kenya shillings would be transmitted to that 1,000 Kenya shillings. Everybody else would get nothing. I actually would have nothing because my money has been, the value has been transmitted once to the other, that person who actually accessed it. And now this opens a wide array of opportunities. Think about people keep talking about these other industries, but if you think about the asset industry, we are speaking in trillions. I think the last I checked, just US dollar alone is 71 trillion in value circulation around the world. But it's not digitized, all of it. So that's a big problem. And so if you're going to digitize assets, now we're talking about transmission of title deeds or through automation, the transmission of shares, transmission of stock, bonds, cars, your phones itself, and so forth. Like following those transactions and so forth, that's where blockchain comes in and it matters in that scenario. And so it changes like the financial industry, which has been lagging behind by even half like a century and so forth. So that's my simple explanation of what blockchain can do for us and what it is.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm Eddie Kago. Maybe a brief clarification. So I organize Hyperledger Nairobi, which is a developer community for Hyperledger. Hyperledger is a blockchain framework, an enterprise blockchain framework by the Linux Foundation. So, and my understanding of what blockchain is and what it can do for you is that we all understand about the JAMA concept. So you have a merry-go-round and you put in your money, and then after a certain period, you get your money later. So in the sense of a blockchain, you have blocks. So the blocks are linked. So let's say you are in that merry-go-round and you get your money. So the next time you're going to get your money, maybe your 7 review is after 7 weeks or 7 days. You can't get your money before the 6th person if you're the first person. You have to wait till the other 6 have gotten their money. So what happens is that you can't, so to speak, cut the queue and get the money before the others have gotten their money. And for you to do that, you have to bribe the other 6 and tell them that I need to get beyond before you guys and get my money before you. So in relation to blockchain, you have interlinked blocks, which are just transactions. So a block is made of transactions, and a transaction is any kind of computation that you could do on a ledger. So a kind of a data structure called a linked list is the closest comparison to what a blockchain is. So it's a data structure that's available on distributed ledgers. So it's not in one computer, but you can find it in different computers and secured by cryptography. So that's where the crypto part comes in. So when you hear cryptocurrencies, it's a cryptographic currency or some sort of token which is used now for the database. So it's simply a database that's not in one location, but managed by consensus. So that's my understanding on what blockchain is, and with different types. So you have private and public blockchains, and public blockchains are what you can edit on. Anyone can see what's available. But then with private blockchains, you can have limits. They're also called permission blockchains. And yeah, so one example is like what Hyperledger is. It's an open source project, and you can be able to build an enterprise solution in it because you have limits on who can access the data on the data structure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, my name is Rosemary Koech Kimwatu. Is the mic working? Good. Yeah, I'm a legal and regulatory affairs specialist with Oxygen MCL. Primarily, my engagement with cryptocurrency and even blockchain mainly is in regards to regulatory perspective. Traditionally, I come from a profession that was built out of distrust. That's why lawyers exist, because we all don't trust each other. Why for me blockchain has been really interesting is because it creates a paradigm shift in regards to how relationships are made. For me, it signifies a democratization of value. It doesn't matter whether it's money, it doesn't matter whether it's goods, and we're happy that eventually Twiga is here. There've been mentions of links with blockchain in terms of transportation, and all these are new, different things that are coming up. And as a policy specialist, my query is what is changing? How do we need to adjust ourselves as policymakers? And even as regular people, what are the needs? What is that we need to know? I think for me of key interest is the feature of immutability. That which you believe is a key issue that is helping deal with the issue of trust. And for me, that's basically my summary. I won't try beat the experts at defining blockchain, but yeah, I'll speak from my point of comfort.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is David Kimero, Technology Director at Living Goods. The question that she's asked is for us to try to define and make it easier for people to comprehend what blockchain is. And the way we look at, the way you think about blockchain, and he's rightfully defined and given a very good example of having the same photo replicated across 100 phones. And then he also went ahead and gave an example of having money or an asset, because in blockchain we talk of digital assets, and assets can be anything. I can assetize even my own vehicle, my own house, everything. But the moment what blockchain allows us is to have what we call single transferability, such that if it's 100 shillings, I'm moving from his phone to my phone, it's just me who gets that. And then secondly, the reason why it's called a block is because a block knows about itself, and it also it calculates its own cryptography. You know, when you have like a file, there's a way you can calculate its SHA-1, isn't it? So you calculate the SHA-1 of that. Just think of it like a SHA-1, but it's a cryptographic token. Then if anything happens, or if I change, he moved 100 shillings, I move 99, I move a shilling from that, and then I put it back, then any other block that comes after me, I'm going to explain that a little in a short while, will get affected. Now, the reason why it's called a blockchain, a chain comes from the fact that he transferred, so I know about the previous block. And any other block that comes after me will know about me. So we create a chain of known blocks, such that I can trace his photo or his digital asset from the time he created that asset. It moved to me, then it moved to her, moved to you, and you moved that asset to someone else. And then there's what we call a verifiability. The reason why it's distributed is because he talked of smart contracts. Each of them can have a self-executing program. Think of it like any other programming language, such that when I move that asset, you can go and have, we can set rules for that particular block and how that block is supposed to move. If I'm buying a vehicle from him, he will set a rule that whenever his vehicle is 300,000 shillings, for instance. I'm not saying your vehicle is that cheap, but 300,000 shillings for this case. Then it's upon me to put in 300,000 shillings so that that ownership can be transferred to me. And that the same amount can be she can put in the same amount so that that asset can move from me to her. And that is what happens in a public blockchain, where you can see the transactions in what we call a distributed ledger, and you can follow that transaction. I will give more examples of how we have implemented that in a different later on, but that is how I understand blockchain, and the opportunities you can see, they are quite immense, they are quite many.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Betty Rose Ngoge. I am a cloud platform consultant at Oracle. where I help organizations be able to use technology as an enabler. And part of the technologies I help them with is usually blockchain. And as my colleagues on the panel have been able to explain very elaboratively what blockchain is, but in simple terms, blockchain is really not a new technology. It is old technologies. The combination of these technologies is what has made it revolutionary. So how I understand it is just a distributed ledger. And what is distributed ledger? So distributed, it means a lot of people have access to it, yeah? And the ledger is a history of transactions. So if we are transacting, we are more than one party transacting, it means each one of us has a copy of the latest ledger, and before anything is changed on the ledger, all of us have to agree on it. And this brings the sense of trust and also transparency for organizations that are working in a distrustful situation. So really, blockchain tries to introduce trust and transparency by ensuring that all transacting parties have the latest copy, and before the copy that they have is changed, they have to agree on it, yeah? So the technology that enables this to happen is what blockchain is, and there are so many intricacies that go into it, like what my colleagues have explained in terms of smart contracts, cryptography, and such kind of things, so yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, quick to the audience. Can you say that from this session you have a better understanding of what blockchain technology is? By a very quick show of hand. All right, thank you. I love the response. You guys are a great audience. We wouldn't be an effective panel if you weren't an effective audience, so keep on the good pace. Let's continue like that. Now, I want you to bear in mind some of the words that they've really emphasized: transparency, trust, immutability, and agreement, because these things are not really foreign to us. We've had them in so many systems and in so many trades. So, as she has aptly mentioned, that blockchain isn't new in itself, okay? It's just that we're taking a combination of new aspects, new discussions, new technologies, and new concepts. So one thing that I'll mention even as I preempt the next question is that blockchain is capable of integration with other technologies such as AI, IoT, and big data, and these are the things that are really being discussed in forums right now and around the world. So the next question that I'll float to them is, what are some of the main problems that blockchain addresses? What are some of the main solutions that blockchain tech really brings?
So I'll let everybody else in the panel be biased to like what they're actually solving, and also I'll be biased in what I'm actually interested in actually solving with blockchain. So there's a company, actually, first of all, shout out to Utu, is the Utu CTO here, who actually, it's called Bastian, who actually are implementing the African trust on the blockchain. You know how like recommendations happen in the foreign countries is through like, what is it called? The reviews. But in Africa it's different. We trust people to people rather than recommendations, right? And Utu is trying to implement that on the blockchain. So that's actually first of the implementations being done in Africa. Utu technologies over there. You can just wave at the people. Yeah. So the second company I want to talk about is Raise Impact, which I'm actually playing a role there. What we're trying to do is actually implement securities or transfer of assets on the blockchain, but starting with securities and bonds and so forth. So if you think about this, like when you're raising capital as a company for the first time, from investors of angel investors, whoever you're raising for, you actually issue out shares, basically, which is a security, promising that the securities will actually be of much more value later. And so right now, how we are stuck in the current global ecosystem is that when you raise money as a startup, is the investor has to stick by you through the 6 years of 10 years that you're going to run the company until your IPO, so they can actually gain value from it. Yes, of course, they'll get exits from X20s to X100s and so forth, but sometimes investors want to exit earlier in the system. So for example, maybe they want to exit a year later or 2 years later because they need that liquidity money because they've actually identified a new startup they want to move the money to. And so what happens right now is the blockchain can now solve that problem right now, meaning that we can move the very oldest financial instrument, which is securities, because right now when you go and buy shares, you're given a piece of paper. In 2018, you're given a piece of paper. If you want to sell it, liquidity is you take that piece of paper, get onto a matatu, get onto your card, rush to town, go to your, it's called what, I don't know, CD something, CDS, yes, and give them that shares and tell them you're selling them, and they'll tell you we'll keep in contact, we'll get into contact 3 days later for you to get your money. 3 days. 3 days. That's a financial system working right now as we work. But now if you shift that entire system, because I feel like financial industries are the most impacted with the blockchain technology, is that if you shift that technology to blockchain, is right now if you buy shares using blockchain, we'll give you tokens to your account. Remember, your account is unique to you through cryptography, because cryptography allows the existence of identity once, and it's not replicated across any other form of the internet. So if you have a digital identity through cryptography, it belongs to you and only you. So we can actually shift our put digital identification, basically what we call tokenization of your securities, and then we send them to your account, to that specific unique address that you have. And now, when it comes to selling them, you don't have to go through all that entire process. What you do is just, you issue out a transaction request, then through smart contracts, which I'll just explain slightly, is that smart contracts were coined by Nick Szabo around 1994. Basically, he in the basic form to explain smart contracts, it's coding legal rules on the internet, and then making them immutable in the sense, because remember when you sign a legal document, it's that legal document that is only identifiable, and if you sign a new one, the previous one becomes what it's called, nullified or voided. Yeah. So smart contracts enable that, because if you write code right now with Python and so forth and put it on GitHub, you can easily change it to a new version in any second. But with smart contracts, once you put it on the internet, that's it. It's immutable. Unless now you communicate with everybody else who's involved in the smart contract to actually issue a new smart contract. So now with that smart contract, it can verify things like, are you registered with CDC? Is that your original identity? Is that your cryptographic identity on the internet? Are you the one who actually issued out that request? How much shares do you have? What's the current value of those shares? And this happens in seconds, even like microseconds. And once all that is verified, somebody else who's looking to buy those shares can now access those shares in seconds. So we move from a 3-day process, or even like a longer process for months, to seconds. So think about like the liquid market that we have from startups where investors have invested money into the industries. We're talking about trillions of dollars just sitting, laying around, staying liquid. If you put them on the blockchain, you now create two markets, which are called the private market, where investors sell shares across each other, and the secondary market, where new investors can also get a piece of the action happening behind a new company. So if you find a company that you want to buy shares from, and there's a company that wants to sell these shares from, you can actually use the smart contract to facilitate this transaction. So we are moving things from like 3 days, things that are happening from 3 days to months, that take months, to actually seconds. And now you create now, as I said before, the internet, it actually is because you create the internet of value. And now you can actually further go and now start moving things like title deeds, bonds, government issued contracts and so forth, private funds. And so the opportunity with blockchain on my side, as the company is actually known as Raise Impact, and that's what they're trying to solve for Africa. There's an American company doing this known as Polymath. They actually have a cryptocurrency out, but Raise Impact is not using a cryptocurrency because it doesn't make sense in the initial stages, because you're dealing with actual securities, and actual securities are very different from cryptocurrencies. And so securities have stayed in a very old format for over 30, even like, I think it's a century so far, because you're using papers. And now blockchain is coming to transform that entire industry. And there's no way you can actually fight it, because it's the only way forward for such a financial system. And so that's my answer. One or two of the applications we are doing with blockchain. So one is the Uto I've actually mentioned from Bastion, and the second one is Raise Impact, where we are trying to digitize securities and move them, make them liquid. And actually, the last part to mention is that once you make them liquid, you enable 900 million people from Africa who use mobile phones. So buying securities from new companies will be as simple as going to M-Pesa and just sending the money and getting the tokens to your mobile phone, which is attached to a specific geographic which provides a unique identity for you. And imagine that right now it means it enables anyone to move away from poverty. Because if you invested even 1,000 shillings and the company ends up being successful, you'll be probably 500 times up, probably. Sometimes we've seen this in crazy valuations where Uber, one of the investors of Uber invested $20 billion. Right now Uber is 120 billion. So it means that is a 200 times up movement. So imagine if you invested 50,000 Kenyan shillings, and one day you woke up to 20 million. Will you be a happy person? Yes, there are risks involved, yes, but as long as those risks, you know about them, because one part of the entire process of the journey is to educate you about investments, because knowledge is power, and also knowledge can move a lot of people from poverty or from even their current state of life to a better state of life. And so that's what I think blockchain can do for Africa.
Thank you.
Maybe you see then wondering how do you interact with this blockchain? How do you get an interface which you can interact with? So I understand that we have a fairly technical understanding of how the internet works. So we all know about the TCP/IP protocol and with the 7 layers. So that's the internet protocol. So on top of it is where now we build the blockchain. So the blockchain, which as we explained is a ledger, is built now on top of the internet protocol. Now on top of the protocol is where now we have user-facing applications, and that's where now people like us come in. So with BlockBuy, we're building a system where you can get access to your health data and own it. So how do you own your data? So I will go maybe to Aga Khan, and my records are there, my health records are there, but if I go to Kenyatta National Hospital, I cannot be able to transfer my data, but it's mine. So why should that be the case, yet it's your own health data and it's confidential? So what you're trying to do is now, at the application level, we built a form of a wallet which you can be able to access your data. So your data is stored there. It's cryptographically secured, because we are talking of now the application level which is relying on the blockchain. So the interesting thing about this is that you can access it in any kind of biometric authentication. You could use your fingerprint, you could use your iris. One application I saw that was being run was by the UN in Syria. So there's a camp where refugees can be able to shop and do everything on the blockchain. So your identity is stored on the blockchain. You can get everything managed. So you have this one single source of truth, which is your digital identity. And from it now, you can be able to get your portions, your food portions. You can be able to get your stipend, which is given to refugees, and it can be tracked. So this reduces fraud. It reduces impersonation. You have your identity secured. So one critical thing we are working on is how do you return the ownership to your hands? You are the owner of your identity. Why should the big companies own your identity and monetize them, yet it's you should be deciding on what to do with it? So she mentioned about how blockchain integrates with things like AI and IoT. One interesting application has been in terms of provenance. So provenance is, in short, a fancy English name of meaning tracking origin of something, where it began. So an instance is tracking where a product moves from, let's say, from farm to plate. So if you want to track whether this fruit that you're eating came from a certified farm, it was grown with best practices. So just follow me as a breakdown the process. So you have the farmer and they harvest it. So they have an application where they can feed in the information on how the process went and what fertilizer they used, what chemical they used to treat their fruits, and then that's onboarded now on the chain. So we talked of blocks being linked to each other cryptographically with hashes, something he mentioned. So then the next level is where it has to be transported. So you're talking about the supply chain, end-to-end supply chain agreement. So from now the transportation, you have this person who is your transporter. You have to be sure that your goods actually from that shamba. They didn't come from someone else. So from there now they get to key in the details on when they received it, so and the state which they received it, and it's certified. So this could be signed digitally by 2 people or like having some sort of high level authentication to assure security. And then next you could have now the load of points. So you have the suppliers and distributors. You want a form of truth that everybody can agree on that this actually happened. So when it's put on the ledger, no one can come and edit what happened before. So if I was a malicious actor and I wanted to come and say that we loaded, let's say, 15 kilos of apple, or we got 20 sacks of maize instead of 40 or 21, I cannot be able to edit it. If I do that, the application will throw an error which is seen to your user as an exception. So you notice an anomaly which wouldn't be accepted into the block. So because the nodes which are on a chain have to agree on the verifiability or validity of a transaction before it's loaded on a block and linked onto the other blocks. So we now get on to the last step where you have, we finished with the suppliers, finished with the distributors, and now coming now to the end sellers. So maybe you have your supermarket or the kiosk nearby at home, and you want to be sure that this actually came from, let's say if it is fair trade, or it was a healthy meat or milk. So you could have some sort of barcode which you can scan with your phone, and that's where the application level comes from. So we mentioned about the TCP/IP. On top of it, now we have now the blockchain level, and then on top of it is where now software developers build the applications. So on top of it is now where you as the user, you don't care how it works. I mean, we use internet, but we never care what happens when you type search. What you don't want to know the get and fetch requests. You just know that you get your request. And that's the interesting thing about blockchain. You don't have to understand the ins and outs. It will be working in such a way that you wouldn't even realize it's working. So if you want to assure yourself that this was actually legit, and you scan with your phone, maybe it's a barcode or QR, you given information that this actually is, so maybe you could have a clean verification tick, and it's assured. So, and one way that you could embed IoT is by the trucks that are used for delivery, by the crates that are used for carriage, and also by the packaging material. So the packaging material could be embedded with maybe chips or electronic configurations of the QR.
For me, I think the most significant use cases are in the financial sector, first and foremost, because of issues of identity. That has been the major concern that has been there. That's why people come up with big programs like anti-money laundering, AML, KYC, Know Your Client, and even recently we've seen banks being fined because of lapses in this. So we see an application that one day provides solutions to some of these basic problems that we have. The second one has been Kenyan perennial problems, land records. I think we all wait for the day when a land transaction will take even a couple of days. We'll be very happy. Because right now I think we have 90 days of completion almost.
At least.
At least. Yeah, at least. It takes really, really long. So those kind of applications coming up. The other issue may be, as I mentioned, our regular trust issues, elections. The countries where you actually sit in your bed and vote over your phone. I think we all look forward to that day when you just don't have to go and do those crazy queues. And as individuals, I think those are some of the main things that we're looking at. But more than that is what the main query that's coming up, and even the main issue we're discussing is what happens to the middleman. I think the reason why systems and structures are built historically is so that we could have an umpire. If it's a financial sector, you had regulators. If it's lands records, you had a registry. So what happens, the questions we're going to ask ourselves is what happens to the middleman? Do they still have a role? And now what happens to the rest of us? Because value has been democratized. We all have consensus as one of the key attributes. So I think those are the key questions we're going to ask ourselves. And for me, it's not even a question of solutions. It's more questions that we need to figure out moving forward. There are many of us today who are maybe blockchain enthusiasts, and then also blockchain critics. We all speak about these platforms. How useful are they? Do they use too much energy? Fine, we had proof of work, now we have proof of stake. We keep trying to tweak the technology. These are the queries that I'm going to be asking my panelists, in as much as I'm a panelist also. Yeah, but the questions to be asked in terms of how useful it is. We have platforms that we use every day, M-Pesa. It's very scalable. It's had wide acceptance. How about the blockchain? What next? Yeah.
I love that.
Right. In my experience and the way we've been using blockchain technology, I need first to explain the context that the organization deals with what we call households. And we have different activities or different activities that are performed on these households. He talked of provenance and single state of origin. We need to register the households. And what we are doing at Living Goods is we are creating a way that we can register households once, and then we allow other key players in the health sector to use the same records. So the way we are doing that, so that we have records which are immutable, is by use of blockchain technology. Then after registering the households, the next thing that we do a lot of training, then we do assessments, and we do some treatment or referrals. And each component of these, and he talked of medical records, is like he preempted my discussion. Each component we need to make sure that these records are available not only to Living Goods, but also to the Ministry of Health and also to other stakeholders. There are other partners who are working in the same area that we are working in. So how do we make sure that our platform is open enough and people are not, editing records and making changes that we are not aware of? So that's how we record our transactions. We record them on blockchain. I will give you the implementation when you see me later on after the discussion. And then these other organizations are able to perform transactions or activities to these households, and then we are also able to get some information because it's a database, so we can sort of do a query to the database. That way, it gives us a very clear view of what activities that are happening to the households. I would give a good classic example of how this is being used. We are having polio campaigns today. And most of the households where we did polio campaigns, we are having some children who are receiving the polio vaccine like twice or even thrice. Because there is no verifiability, there is no way we can keep track of those households. So we are coming up with technology that allows us to query households with small children, and it does not necessarily have to be owned by Living Goods. Anyone can come in and do registration, and then you, as the provider, you're able to know this household has a kid who received the vaccine or who hasn't received the vaccine. Then in the area of digital referrals, we want to make sure that whenever someone has been referred by a community health provider, that person actually goes to the health facility, and that health facility can validate that the person actually went to the health facility. So that is another area that we're implementing blockchain technology. So it's a whole ecosystem of technology, of communication, protocol, and systems involved. And this system do not necessarily have to be the same. For instance, the health facility system is totally different from what the community health provider will use, and it's totally different from what Living Goods backbone technology is. So we have that independence of technology, and each of the technology is able to access the distributed database. The other application that that I'm currently doing, which is a bit quite interesting because it's now related to money, at Grassroots Economics Foundation. I'm sure most of you guys have heard of Bagla Pesa before. or in your previous work. So what you're doing currently is now looking at the Bagla Pesa and making it a digital token. The way we are doing it is that we create, I will also go to the implementation, the technologies behind later if you see me. We are creating tokens for people and allowing people to transact amongst themselves. There's a whole lot of legal framework that has to be developed, but the way we do it, one, we have the KYC, which is quite important in terms of registration. This is Know Your Customer. Then after that, we create digital wallets for users, and we give them tokens, the Bagla tokens. And then on this platform, what you've done, we've allowed people to create their own currencies. And then each of the currency has like a base reserve. And the way it works is that people need to come into a consensus on how, on the value, right? So when you read about the properties of money, then you can understand this concept that money can only get value if people come into consensus. We give value because I agree that when you give me that piece of paper written 50 shillings, it is 50 shillings and the other person can accept it. So it is the same principle that we use for the community currencies, and then we tokenize that. Then each transaction that is performed against those currencies, or rather against your wallet, because we reduce the tokens in your wallet and we transfer the tokens to someone else in exchange of a service, for instance, or in exchange of a good or a product. So that is another classic example that you're using blockchain, and well, it's quite successful. Both of them are quite successful in the way we've implemented them. And I see lots and lots of opportunity in not only those two, but also in other areas that are going to be impacted. I'm thinking of areas like mobile money transfer. How do I transfer money not only from my Safaricom to another Safaricom user, but also to a different user, not only using the networks in Kenya, but maybe Uganda, Tanzania, or Africa. So it's another area that I know will get impacted very soon.
Okay, so Oracle is also playing a big part in the blockchain area, and to be able to explain better how we are participating in that area, I want to explain the two types of blockchains that we have. We have two types of blockchains, and one is permissionless and the other one is permissioned. Permissionless, it means if you need to be party in that blockchain, you don't need authorization from anyone. These are examples like Ethereum, Bitcoin. Actually, most cryptocurrencies are running on the permissionless blockchain, that there is no one person who is controlling the blockchain. If you need to be part of it, you just join, you just go and join, and you can also be anonymous. In permissioned blockchain, which is what Oracle offers, it means that there is a founder, and then there are people, the founder gives authorization to people to join the blockchain. So that means the founder has more control of who is party to that blockchain. And that is what Oracle offers, because we play in the enterprise, or we want to give enterprises and small businesses more control into the data that they want shared or when they are transacting. So we are using the Hyperledger platform, and there are a couple of use cases that we have been able to toy with, and I want to explain one that we did in Nigeria. So usually what happens is when manufacturers are doing their own, they're producing their goods and just goods and products. Usually they get subsidy in terms of tax when they are getting their raw materials. But usually there is no way you can track the whole process to see exactly what they put in the materials they put in the product and how the process was all done. So for example, we recently had a sugar problem in Kenya where there were claims of it not being very consumable to humans because of this couple of things they had put in the products. And what Nigeria is trying to do is be able to track the whole process, what are manufacturers putting in, and in Nigeria there are a couple of organizations. I think there are about 6 organizations that are involved in the whole process of monitoring whatever manufacturers are putting in the product to the end product when it gets to consumers. So what we did is we were able to help the organizations use blockchain to be able to monitor all the products. And now if you get a product, you can easily see whether it's counterfeit or whatever went into that good when you have it or when you're consuming it. So that's one. We are also doing a couple of work in the financial industry and insurance. And I'll give an example. When you have if say you want to take a car insurance, it's usually very possible for you to go and insure with more than one insurance company. And when you need to make a claim, it's also very possible for you to go and make a claim in all these companies that you have insured with. And that's fraud in itself. And one of the reasons why this is happening is because insurance companies are not sharing information with each other. That's one. And the reason why they're not sharing information with each other is because they don't trust each other. Like, if I give you that information, what can you do with it? You know, you might go and take my customers and such kind of things. So there's a trust issue, and that's why there's a lot of fraud in the insurance industry. If you put this on the blockchain, so that whenever you go and insure a car, all insurance companies are able to get notified, and whenever you need to make a claim, all of them are able to get notified. You don't need to put information of how much premium they're paying and such kind of things. You just need to put an identifier of the car and the person who has insured it, so that everyone else knows, and that will curb a lot of fraud in the industry. So we are playing in that industry. In the financial industry, there are a couple of use cases, trade finance being one of them, because if you look at trade finance, it involves a lot of parties, and there's a lot of distrust in that whole process. Because just to try and explain what trade finance is, in the case of international trade, where you have an exporter and an importer, for example, and one wants to send goods to the other, but they don't want to send goods before they see the money, and this one doesn't want to pay the money because I might send the money and this person might not send the goods. Yeah, there's usually such kind of a thing. So they get a third party who is usually a financial institution to help create trust and also to help finance the whole process, because sometimes the one party might not have enough money to finance the whole process. So in such a situation, if you introduce blockchain to it, you're able to introduce trust so that all parties that are pertinent to that whole transaction have full visibility of what is happening, and it makes the process more transparent. And by use of smart contract, you're able to just give it conditions, and when a condition is met, it's able to execute a contract. So there are so many use cases that we're doing, and we have a couple of live implementation already globally, and one in Africa, the one that I just explained, in just about 2 or 3 months of launching. We're also really trying to work with the government, because if you ask me, the government will be the biggest beneficiary of blockchain, in terms of just look at what happens in Kenya whenever we have elections, for example. Parties do not agree that they won, and parties do not also agree that they lost fairly. If you put that whole process on a blockchain, it will enable even the young people to vote without needing to queue at a polling station, just from the comfort of your home, for example. Look at institutions of identity. The reason why they don't want to share information, for example, say the tax collection organization and the registrations of birth and death, is because each one of them needs to have control of their data. So if you put them in a blockchain, and I have seen governments, for example, I think Estonia is already trying to implement one of the, something with the government to store public citizen identities on blockchain. If you're able to put that and give ownership to the real owners of this data, which is the citizens, it will enable more transparency and trust, and it will also make the process more efficient. As I close, you might have your business and you're wondering, how can blockchain enable me better efficiently do my work Yeah? So there are two things you need to look at. Two things. Look at if there is any process that is involving more than one party and these parties do not trust each other. It could be one organization and several departments, and it could also be your organization transacting with other organizations. Where there is trust needed, blockchain becomes an answer. The second place where blockchain will be very beneficial for any organization is where there is a lot of reconciliation required. Because look at it, what is reconciliation? It's just me asking for your data and then verifying whether the data you have is the data I have, yeah? And look at it, what is blockchain? It's a distributed ledger, and it means everyone has the same copy of the latest information. So if everyone has the latest copy of the information, why do we need to reconcile again? So those are the two ways and the major use cases I see benefiting, organization benefiting from blockchain, where trust is needed and where reconciliation is also required. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Let's appreciate them, please. And appreciate yourselves as an audience as well. You guys are doing really great. So we can see from what they've shared that there's what is being applied right now and there's what's being applied in future. As I try to land this plane because it's really high up in the air and I'm really enjoying the session myself, I just want you to prepare your questions. I think one or two as will be allowed. How many questions tops?
You might have to discuss with people during the tea break.
All right, that's fine. So let me just conclude this session by saying that blockchain it's a solution, right? But it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There are areas where blockchain will not be applied. There are areas where we won't necessarily need blockchain technology. And we need to be able to ask the questions, as she emphasized, that why will this tech be so significant? Where will it be most important? Where will it be most efficient? There are areas where it won't be because in some instances, using a blockchain platform is costly. It's actually very costly because you do have to have the data infrastructure to maintain the servers, the data, the information. You have to have enough resources to cover that so that you're using the blockchain technology. So you need to ask yourself, is this cost efficient for me as a business or for me as an organization, right? And you also need to be able to ask yourself, are you comfortable with having your data immutable? As in, this data is visible forever, that you did this transaction with this person or this amount, because there are ways of tracking some of these information, because not all blockchains are anonymous. Not all of them will give you complete anonymity of your information. So you need to be able to consider that, is your privacy more important than having your information or your transactions on the blockchain? And the other thing is that we have to consider the current arbitration gaps. For as long as we don't have regulation, our transactions will require that we act in the best interest of each other. And the fact that not all the actors in the blockchain space have each other's best interests, we will need to see more of policy, more of framework, more of investments, both by governments and organizations, just coming up with policies that will enable users to make the most of this technology, right? So even for EOS Nairobi, it's taking a lead in setting up and creating a developer ecosystem in Africa so that we get these conversations going in terms of what are the solutions that we can do, what are some of the solutions that we can really create for our communities, for our country, for even our continent as Africa. Because one thing he mentioned is wealth creation, and that's one of the things that blockchain will allow us to extract and really create value for Africa. So thank you so much for having us, and I think you will just get to talk to us over coffee, right? Okay, thank you.